All right, our praise and our dear Heavenly Father in heaven, we come to you thankful and humble in your presence and just thankful that we could do this Bible study once again. We ask that you help us learn something today and help those who are listening um, from anywhere else in this world that they get something from it. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.
Amen.
So we'll do Genesis 31. I'll start it off.
Chapter 31. Jacob flees from Laban. But Jacob soon learned that Laban's sons were grumbling about him. Jacob has robbed our father of everything, they said. He has gained all his wealth at our father's expense. And Jacob began to notice a change in Laban's attitude toward him. Then the Lord said to Jacob, return to the land of your father and grandfather and to your relatives there, and I will be with you. So Jacob called Rachel and Leah out to the field where he was watching his flock. He said to them, I have noticed that your father's attitude toward me has changed, but the God of my father has been with me. You know how hard I have worked for your father. He has cheated me, changing my wages 10 times, but God has not allowed him to do me anything. For if he said, the speckled animals will be your wages, the whole flock began to produce speckled young. And when he changed his mind and said, the striped animals will be your wages, then the whole flock produced striped young. In this way, God has taken your father's animals and given them to me. One time during the mating season, I had a dream and saw that the male goats mating with the females were streaked, speckled, and spotted. Then in my dream, the angel of God said to me, Jacob. And I replied, yes, here I am. The angel said, look up, and you will see that only the streaked, speckled, and spotted males are mating with the females of your flock. For I have seen how Laban has treated you. I am the God who appeared to you at Bethel, the place where you anointed the pillar of stone and made your vow to me. Now get ready and leave this country and return to the land of your birth. Rachel and Leah responded, that's fine with us. We won't inherit any of our father's wealth anyway. He has reduced our rights to those of foreign women, and after he sold us, he wasted the money you paid him for us. All the wealth God has given you from our father legally belongs to us and our children. So go ahead and do whatever God has told you. So Jacob put his wives and children on camels, and he drove all his livestock in front of him. He packed all the belongings he had acquired in Padan Aram and set out for the land of Canaan, where his father Isaac lived. At the time they left, Laban was some distance away, shearing his sheep. Rachel stole her father's household idols and took them with her. Jacob outwitted Laban the Aramean, for they set out secretly and never told Laban they were leaving. So Jacob took all his possessions with him and crossed the Euphrates River, heading for the hill country of Gilead.
All right. So let's see what we got here. So Jacob flees to Laban.
From Laban.
Oh yeah, from Laban.
I think the first two, I think we spoke about it. It says that the sons were getting mad because God was blessing Jacob kind of at the expense of their father. And that's what verse 1 says, and then verse 2 says, and Jacob began to notice a change in Laban's attitude towards him. And we spoke about this before. A lot of times when somebody's oppressing you, they start to treat you bad when they can't control you, or they start to treat you bad when they can't oppress you. So when you're being oppressed, they love you, but once you break out of the oppression or the control, they start to treat you bad.
And I wanted to put up. Go ahead, finish.
No, that was it.
I wanted to put a proverb because when I was reading that, the Spirit reminded me of a proverb. It's Proverbs 13, verses 22, the second half of the sentence. So it says, good people leave an inheritance to their grandchildren. And then the second part of that verse says, but the sinner's wealth passes to the godly. Catch that. The sinner's wealth passes. So his sons say he has gained all his wealth at our father's expense. But what is it? His dad was cheating Jacob, which is a sin. He's cheating Jacob. So it says, okay, the Bible literally says in Proverbs 13:22, the sinner's well passes to the godly. And I think that stood out to me. And that's what you see is happening here. And as we're going to see, as we continue to read, Jacob wasn't really doing anything. It was literally God. It was God that was doing it.
Yep. It says, then the Lord said to Jacob, return to the land of your father and your grandfather and to your relatives there, and I will be with you. And that's good that Jacob was obedient to the Lord. He didn't really leave without the Lord's permission. So the thing I can take from him is, you want to make sure you're spirit led and you move when God tells you to move instead of moving when you tell yourself to move, because God makes provision for you when you obey him. It says, so Jacob called Rachel and Leah out to the
I want to
field.
put a verse. I want to connect the verse to what you just said real fast. When you said to wait on God, Proverbs 3:5 says, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not depend on your own understanding. Verse 6 says, seek his will in all you do, and he will show you which path to take. And I think, like you said, we ought to be spirit-led with these decisions we make, because sometimes, and I know there's a Bible verse, it's in, I believe, 1 Peter, it says, if suffering is what God wants for you to do in this time, then suffer. Because sometimes we think all suffering is bad, but in some seasons, like Joseph, where he's suffering, he's wrongfully accused from Potiphar, now he's in a prison, his brothers stole him. So that's all suffering, but he went through it. Because sometimes it's in God's will for you to suffer, because I'm going to end up using this. Just relax, stay in it for now. In due season, it'll all make sense. Because the Bible is like you read in Romans 12 just now, where it talks about how God's will for you is good, pleasing, and perfect. Well, if God's will is good and pleasing and perfect, then you got to trust God in this process, even in suffering. And Jacob did that. And like you said, now God is releasing him. So he went through all of this where it's not fair. Laban lied to him, said he was going to give him Rachel, but gave him Leah. He's being cheated in his money. All of this is happening. He's dealing with it. And then when God spoke that and said to leave, then he left. And some people, because I remember I've dealt with this with jobs. You'll go to a job and you're being persecuted there and you just quit. But you got to make sure you get that authorization from God. Same thing with a church. Make sure you're spirit-led in how you do it, because sometimes it could be God's will for you to suffer. Sometimes God says go, but just always make sure you're spirit-led and not just led by your flesh.
That's right. So after he calls his wives, it says he said to them, I have noticed that your father's attitude towards me has changed, but the God of my father has been with me. You know how hard I have worked for your father, but he has cheated me, changing my wages 10 times. But God has not allowed him to do me any harm. That's a beautiful thing to see. God's character doesn't change for his people. You can have the confidence of, like, if anybody's against you, who can be now? It is a Bible verse that says, if God is for me, who can be against you? So like if someone's mistreating you and you're a child of God, just be patient. Let God fight that battle. Because in the end, God's gonna frustrate those people who's against you. They're gonna try to put all these snares and traps, but there's a bunch of Psalms that say it's gonna turn against them.
I want to put a Bible verse. I want to put that Bible verse. It's a proverb as well. A couple proverbs today. Proverbs 20 verses 22 says, don't say, I will get even, for this is wrong. Wait for the Lord to handle the matter.
Exactly. That's the beautiful part. And that grows your faith too, man. That grows your faith when you know God's fighting that battle for you. And that allows you to, like, turn the other cheek, as they always say. Is letting God fight your battles is just, number one, it's going to show the other people you're covered. Number two, is going to grow that faith muscle, man, because you're going to be like, yeah, there's somebody actually fighting for me. Even though you don't see him, he's actually working together for my good.
And he's going to tell us what happens if you continue in verses 8. He tells us how God didn't allow Laban to harm him.
Yeah, it says, for if he said, the speckled animals will be your wages, the whole flock began to produce speckled young. And when he changed his mind and said, the striped animal will be your wages, then the whole flock produced striped young. In this way, God has taken your father's animals and given them to me. They ain't nothing they could do. Whatever's yours is for you.
Yep, I think this goes back to what was happening before, where they were taking his wells, and he'll just dig another one. And I call that God's favor, and I call it when you can't miss. It's just like they're trying whatever they can to do it, and literally, like if you say I can't have that, God's gonna give me this. If you say I can't have this, like doesn't matter what you do, God is gonna ultimately His will is gonna be done.
And that frustrates them, man. That frustrates them a lot.
You're trying your hardest to oppress.
They think they're smart. They're like, all right, well, the stripes are doing good, so let me go with the stripes, and the speckled ones are the ones that are doing good. So let me switch it. And then it's just God is playing games with them.
And I think that's another thing that I think Christians ought to pray is for favor. Because like Max said, when you have God's favor, you can't miss. And it's not you, it's God's grace and favor on you. But it's like when Jesus told the apostles to go out, he says, go to a city, stay in any home. He already put favor in these cities that someone was going to invite these guys home, give them clothes and food, favor. Jesus has so much confidence. He said, don't take a stick, don't take money, don't even take a stranger's clothes. Because he knew my favor is upon you guys. You're going to go somewhere, you're going to have, and it's the same thing you see here. God's favor is upon them. And I think, like I said, that's something Christians ought to pray for is God's favor. Because if you have God's favor, you know, I always say you don't have to worry. You're going to find food. You always have a place to lay your head. God will put people on your path, and you'll never lack.
Mm-hmm. That's 100% right. Where are we at? It says one time during the mating season, I had a dream and saw that the male goats mating with the females were streaked, speckled, and spotted. Then in my dream, the angel of God said to me, Jacob, and I replied, yes, here I am. Angel said, look up and you will see that only the streaked, speckled, and spotted males are mating with the females of your flock. For I have seen how Laban has treated you.
And I want to just stop right there. He says, for I have seen how Laban has treated you. And if you remember when God is talking to Moses, he says, I have heard the cries of my people.
Yes.
He also said, he said the same wording though. He says, I have seen too.
Exactly how Pharaoh has been oppressing you. So it's just like this idea that when you're going through something, you may feel like, dang, nobody understands, or you feel me, God is silent on this matter, because next day I wake up, it's the same thing. Next day I wake up, it's the same thing. But one day, like God doesn't tell Jacob that he sees him until now, after all of that. So sometimes you may be going through this, but one day God's gonna be like, I kept track of all of it.
And I'm gonna read it. Exodus 3:9. It says, look, God tells Moses, look, the cry of the people of Israel has reached me, and I have seen how harshly the Egyptians abuse them. So to your point, God sees it. He's seen it. He's seeing it. And that's why I say that we have to be patient even in suffering, because Jesus he's our example. He suffered. He was dead for 3 days, and then God vindicated him. He rose from the dead. He rose to the highest place of honor. And the Bible also says he's going to come back with the angels of heaven and judge all the world, the people who didn't believe, the people who persecuted him, killed him. So the reality is, like you said, God sees all and understand that even Joseph, I love the story of Joseph. It's literally the same thing. There will be an hour of vindication for those who are oppressed wrongfully, because God sees it and he's a just God. But we have to wait, though, in that process of persecution, because I always tell people, if you handle it yourself, God's like, all right, you got it, bro.
Yep.
Oh, Stanley, they're cheating you, and so you just cuss them out and go beat them up. All right. Well, Stan, I wasn't gonna handle it for you, but said clearly you got it. You got it, bro. But when you wait, when God vindicates you, it's a beautiful, like Joseph's vindication. You look at the Bible, can you imagine? His brothers sold him. He's wrongfully accused by Potiphar. The guy he interprets his dream forgets about him. It's just like bad. Like, geez. But when it was his time. So wait on God.
God sees you. God sees it, man.
Yeah, that gives you hope to stick it through the hard times and just, at some point you're gonna see light at the end of the tunnel.
Yep.
And that's a good thing to know for the people who follow God. And then I think, where is it? It
Verse
says,
13.
13.
yeah, it says, I am the God who appeared to you at Bethel, the place where you anointed the pillar of stone and made your vow to me. Now get ready and leave this country and return to the land of your birth. So there goes that. There goes the permission to leave.
And I
like
wanna make a point after you finish.
No, that was pretty much it. I was gonna say, like, he's just being obedient, man. That's the one thing I see about him is he's obedient to the word. He doesn't move until God tells him to move.
We have biblical proof that the angel of the Lord is Jesus. Now we have biblical proof. How? You look at verses 11. Joseph says, then in my dream, the angel of God said to me, Jacob, and I replied, yes, here I am. It refers to Jesus as the angel of God. Now look what happens in verse 13, talking about the same person, the angel of God. The angel of God says to Joseph in his dream in verse 13, I am the God who appeared to you at Bethel, the place where you anointed the pillar of stone and made your vow to me. So you go to Genesis 28, and at verse 13, it says, and at the top of the stairway stood the Lord. And he said, I am the Lord, the God of your grandfather Abraham and the God of your father Isaac. The ground you are lying on belongs to you. So the angel of the Lord is Jesus.
So I guess the Bible can interchange angel in the place.
No, when it's Jesus, it'll say the angel of the Lord. If
because
it's not
in
Jesus,
verse 12 it says the angel.
Yeah, but you have to, the context of the angel is speaking of the context from verse 11. Remember
Yeah,
that.
that's what I mean. It's referring to him. It says the angel of God.
So when it says the angel, it's speaking of the angel that we're just talking about in verse 11.
Right.
And remember as well, Jesus refers to himself as the stairway. So it goes back to that same point because he identifies himself literally with that same moment. And remember, the word angel means messenger. So when you use it at its most concrete definition, it does make sense.
I just wanted to point that out. Whenever you see the angel of God, that's a reference to Jesus. But I think that's that. And he goes on to say the place, I appeared to you at Bethel, the place where you anointed the pillar of stone and made your vow to me. Now get ready and leave this country and return to the land of your birth. And the vow that Jacob made in Genesis 28 to Christ was, if God will indeed be with me and protect me on this journey, and if he will provide me with food and clothing, and if I return safely to my father's home, then the Lord will certainly be my God. And this memorial pillar I have set up will become a place of worshiping God, and I will present to God a tenth of everything he gives me. The thing is, he made a vow, and in his vow, and I believe when he was, where is that at? That was when he was on his way to go to Laban. When we're in Genesis 28, where Jacob makes his vow, he's on his way to his uncle Laban's house, but he made that vow. In a sense, because he makes his vow, now it's fulfilling time of that vow. This is the thing about a vow. A vow is binding. I don't know if that's making sense. Because he vowed in 28, if I will return safely to my father's house, he was going to get to go back to his father's house. He was going to go back because he made a vow to God. If you allow me to get back there safely, you will be my God. All right, bet. I'm going to make sure you get back there safely because I'm going to be your God. And now it's time. That's why you see in the beginning of this, verse 3, now God saying to Jacob, go. He says, return where? To the land of your father. Remember the vow. His vow was, if you allow me to return safely back to his father's house, he said, you will certainly be my God, And my point in saying all that is a vow is binding. It's binding. And in this case, a vow was a good thing because now it's going to be what's going to allow him to get out of this place to go back home. And God's favor is going to be with him when he gets there.
Right. And you see how you see how he'll fulfill that vow because you see God fulfilled his part of the vow too.
Mm-hmm.
So basically he's gonna have more trust in God, and that's his faith being built right there. For me, because you've seen Abraham's faith be built. Now you're seeing, you're seeing Jacob's faith be built right now. Even through all the trials and tribulations, seeing God is, making sure he doesn't get cheated. He's making sure that he goes back to his father. So those are things that I see as like faith building for him.
Now verses 14.
And then it says, Rachel and Leah respond, "That's fine with us. We won't inherit any of our father's wealth anyway. He has reduced our rights to those of foreign women. And after he sold us, he wasted the money you paid him for us. All the wealth God has given you from our father legally belongs to us and our children. So go ahead and do whatever God has told you."
And I think what's important there, I've learned this. This is an important part that we just read. God can speak to Stanley, but how you're gonna know sometimes, fam, that God, how God can confirm what he said to you, he's gonna use your wife.
Mm-hmm.
This is why the Bible says your wife is your helper for a reason. Notice what happens, Stanley. I want to take you back. Look at this. If you read verses 3, I want you to read verses 3, and then look what happens immediately in verses 4. And then we'll come back to 14.
Then the Lord said to Jacob, "Return to the land of your father and grandfather and go and to your relatives there, and I will be with you." So Jacob called Rebekah and Leah out where he was watching.
So the first thing he does after God tells him this, he goes to his wives. Let me go talk to them and tell them this. And how you're gonna know how you know God really spoke to him, look at their response in verse 14. Confirmation. Right. They're in complete agreement, which is proof you can see God really spoke to him. Mm-hmm. You see, one thing I've learned as a husband, I always make sure when God speaks to me, I still talk to my wife about it. Now, granted, this is why it's important to make sure our wives have a spiritual relationship with God too. Because if your wife doesn't have a relationship with God and you tell her something God told you, well, if she's not spiritual, she's looking at it from a worldly perspective, well, that's a problem. So that's why you still have to have discernment to know, is her response credible? But if she has spiritual eyes and she has a relationship with God for herself, she will have the discernment to know what you're saying is from God, and she will be in alignment with you. But that's why I say, like, what we're talking about, having kingdom in the household, is so important, because your wife and you should be in agreement when you're talking about these big decisions you're going to make, leaving the estate, quitting your job, putting your kids in this particular, you and your wife have to be in agreement. And what I'm saying is God will speak to you, but still speak to your wife. Same thing. When you think about Hagar, Abraham didn't just say, let me go sleep with Hagar. Sarah told him to do it, and they were in agreement, and then they did it. Think about the Towers of Babel. The people were all in agreement. They were on one, and then they were able to do it. My point is, these are his wives. He tells them this is what God says, and they're in agreement. Do it. So I think that's an important thing for husbands to realize, is don't just do things and you don't talk to your wife, because sometimes God can use her to confirm that either, nah, bro, I didn't talk to you. Because I remember I had a dream one time. I shared it with my wife because we were looking for a church to go to. And I could just say this real quick. In the dream, I saw the church. I was at a church. I wasn't at the church, but the lady, like one of the pastors of the church, was telling me they were happy I was at the church. But immediately after that scene, I walk into another room and there's a girl in the next room, like performing like a sexual act with herself in the same dream. But I completely bypassed that because I'm like, well, in the previous room I was in, the pastor said she was happy as back. So I tell my wife the dream, like, I think that's the church. But I explain the whole dream. But she's like, sir, are you gonna just bypass the last part? I'm like, yeah, that was kind of weird, but forget that part, the other part. No, sir, you can't. And then that's when my conviction came. I'm like, yo, I think my wife has a point. I don't think I should bypass that. And I'm like, this dream can't be God, because how did God just speak to me? And then I go to the next room and there's sexual immorality going on in the same scene. And then, it's because she said, I don't think that's God, babe, because why would you get a word from God and then go in the next room and now this girl's like performing? And then because my wife said that, I reevaluated the dream and she was right. What's my point? If I would have just said, no, I don't got to talk to my wife, I'm the man, I make the decisions, screw that, God showed me the dream, we'd have went back to the church and I would have looked dumb. Because at some point I would have realized this isn't the church I'm supposed to be at. And then I leave again. And now I look dumb. I look like I don't know what I'm doing. So this is why I tell husbands, it's good for you to have a relationship with God. And so your wife has to have a relationship with God, and make sure when God speaks to you, speak to your wife. And if it was really God, you're going to see that your wife and you, because you're one, you both are in tune with the spirit, she'll be able to discern and be used. God can use you to confirm, yes, do this. And you'll know that it is God. So I tell husbands, don't think just because you're the leader, I don't need to tell my wife, well, God told me to do it. Yeah, God told Jacob to do it, and he still went and told his wives to see what they were going to say. So.
Yeah, that makes sense. Gotta be in unison, in one agreement, one accord. Especially
Jesus says, well, a kingdom divided won't stand. A family splintered by feuding will fall apart. So if they don't agree with him and he goes with them, it's not gonna work out, because he's trying to go and they're like, nah, we're not leaving. And he said, we're going anyways. There's discord. That's playground for the enemy.
Yes, sir. And what were we? 17. So Jacob put his wives and children on a camel, and he drove all his livestock in front of him. He packed all belongings he had acquired and had an Aram, and set out for the land of Canaan, where his father Isaac lived. At the time they left, Laban was some distance away, shearing his sheep. Rachel stole her father's household idols and took them with her. And Jacob outwitted Laban and Aramean, for they set out secretly and never told Laban they were leaving. So Jacob took all his possessions with him and crossed the Euphrates River, heading for the hill country of Gilead. Yeah, we could see that he obeyed at once and took all the possessions with him. He didn't have to tell Laban, because he had permission by God. And what you see here also is Rachel stole her father's household idols. And I think this is going to carry into what we're going to read in the next section. I don't think there's much to talk about what she's doing here now, other than it's wrong what she's doing. But it'll carry into the next section.
And I think that's the only thing I was gonna say is that stealing will catch up to you. So it's one thing if you steal, you don't know Christ. I believe it's grace. But if you know the Bible, you have discernment, you have the Spirit, you know right from wrong, and you steal, it will catch up to you. And like you said, we're going to see that in the next chapter.
Yep. All right, so I'll play the next section.
Laban pursues Jacob. 3 days later, Laban was told that Jacob had fled. So he gathered a group of his relatives and set out in hot pursuit. He caught up with Jacob 7 days later in the hill country of Gilead. But the previous night, God had appeared to Laban the Aramean in a dream and told him, I'm warning you, leave Jacob alone.
Leave Jacob alone.
Jacob as he was camped in the hill country of Gilead, and he set up his camp not far from Jacob's. What do you mean by stealing away like this? Laban demanded. How dare you drag my daughters away like prisoners of war? Why did you slip away secretly? Why did you steal away? And why didn't you say you wanted to leave? I would have given you a farewell feast with singing and music, accompanied by tambourines and harps. Why didn't you let me kiss my daughters and grandchildren and tell them goodbye? You have acted very foolishly. I could destroy you, but the God of your father appeared to me last night and warned me, leave Jacob alone. I can understand your feeling that you must go and your intense longing for your father's home, but why have you stolen my gods? I rushed away because I was afraid, Jacob answered. I thought you would take your daughters from me by force. But as for your gods, see if you can find them, and let the person who has taken them die. And if you find anything else that belongs to you, identify it before all these relatives of ours, and I will give it back. But Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen the household items. Laban went first into Jacob's tent to search there, then into Leah's, and then the tents of the two servant wives. But he found nothing. Finally, he went into Rachel's tent. But Rachel had taken the household idols and hidden them in her camel's saddle, and now she was sitting on them. When Laban had thoroughly searched her tent without finding them, she said to her father, Please, sir, forgive me if I don't get up for you. I'm having my monthly period. So Laban continued his search, but he could not find the household items. Then Jacob became very angry, and he challenged Laban. What's my crime? He demanded. What have I done wrong to make you chase after me as though I were a criminal? You have rummaged through everything I own. Now show me what you've found that belongs to you. Set it out here in front of us before our relatives for all to see. Let them judge between us. For 20 years I have been with you, caring for your flocks. In all that time, your sheep and goats never miscarried. In all those years, I never used a single ram of yours for food. If any were attacked and killed by wild animals, I never showed you the carcass and asked you to reduce the count of your flock. No, I took the loss myself. You made me pay for every stolen animal, whether it was taken in broad daylight or in the dark of night. I worked for you through the scorching heat of the day and through cold and sleepless nights. Yes, for 20 years I slaved in your house. I worked for 14 years earning your 2 daughters and then 6 more years for your flock. And you changed my wages 10 times. In fact, if the God of my father had not been on my side, the God of Abraham and the fearsome God of Isaac, you would have sent me away empty-handed. But God has seen your abuse and my hard work. That is why he appeared to you last night and rebuked you.
Hey. Boy, Jacob's talking strong. He's talking bold over here.
He's like, bro, man, I ain't do nothing, bro. I'm innocent. So basically 3 days later, Laban basically was told Jacob had fled, so he gathered a group of his relatives and set out in hot pursuit. So he's coming right after this dude, because he caught up with Jacob 7 days later in the hill country of Gilead. So basically, he was coming after him in hot pursuit. And
I want to make a point there. It goes back for me when you think about Genesis 11 with the Towers of Babel. It says that all the people were united, and so they set out to build this tower, and they were doing it. And when it says he was in hot pursuit, what stood out to me there is if Christians would be zealous in hot pursuit to win souls, in hot pursuit to, establish kingdom wherever God has placed them, you would see kingdom. You would see souls won. Why I say that? Jacob had a 3-day head start on this man. Think about that. Mm-hmm. He had a 3-day head start on this man, but because Laban was in hot pursuit, that means Laban was up in the night still. While Jacob's sleeping, Laban's moving. He's moving. Jacob's sleeping. He's moving. He's moving. And what you see, because of his hot pursuit, he caught up to him. So I think what stood out for me in that was Christians ought to have a hot pursuit and be zealous. Jesus had a hot pursuit when he was crossing the lake to go to the other side to cast out demons out of a man. Jesus was in hot pursuit when he met the woman at the well, and he was actually there to give her the gospel. the reality is he was in hot pursuit of his whole ministry. He couldn't stay in one place because he had to bring the gospel to as many places as possible before he left. My point is, the apostles were in hot pursuit to keep carrying on the gospel. And today, you and me have the Bible because of those guys' hot pursuit to continue what Jesus started. So I think what I take from this is, as Christians, this is proof to me, if we have a hot pursuit to finish what Christ started or continue what Christ started, we will see lives change. We will see people come to give their life to Jesus. And I just think that's my encouragement, is that let's have that hot pursuit. Even this guy, in this case, was doing it for the wrong reasons. But point is, it still worked.
And then verse 24, it says, God talked to him before he did that and said, I'm warning you, leave Jacob alone. And I love this because God is always working. So it's just like, whether you're going to have a job interview, God may speak to the manager that night before, or whatever it is, it's like God is working behind the scenes. I don't even think Jacob knows that God spoke to him in a dream.
Oh, he's gonna find out after. He's gonna find out afterwards.
Oh, okay, but he has to tell him. But my point is just like, God is doing this, but he's not telling you he's doing this. So you may get these opportunities, but you don't know if that person had an encounter with God before that.
That's true.
And then it's like, well, that's why this happened, because God spoke to me here. But I just love the fact that God is always working. So if someone has a problem with you, God may have spoke to him in a dream and you don't even know.
Yeah.
Leave him alone. And then you all of a sudden see he leaves you alone.
That's good.
Yeah. And you could see it could even be by like certain things happening to them. When they're trying to do harm to you, things start to turn bad for them, and then they leave it alone, and then it's perfectly fine. I think that's another way God can say, hey, stay away, touch. As you can see, that's what happened to Laban too. Things started to turn sour for him. What's another thing? So we leave off. Laban caught up with Jacob as he was camped in the hill country of Gilead, and he set up his camp not far from Jacob. He said, what do you mean by deceiving me like this? Laban demanded. How dare you drag my daughters away like prisoners of a war? Why did you slip away secretly? Why did you deceive me? Why didn't you say you wanted to leave? I would have given you a farewell feast with singing and music accompanied by tambourines and harps. It says, why didn't you let me kiss my daughters and grandchildren and tell them goodbye? You have acted very foolishly. I could destroy you, but the God of your father appeared to me last night and warned me, leave Jacob alone.
I want to just point that out right here. He says, I could destroy you, but God spoke to me. So it's like, because God spoke to him, he changed what he was wanting to do.
Exactly.
And it goes back to like the story with Abraham when he went to what was the guy's name? He went to
Abimelech or
it was Abimelech.
Pharaoh.
There you go. It was Abimelech, and then Abimelech ends up taking his wife, but then God appears to him and says, "You sleep with her. You and your household. This whole town is going down."
It's a warning.
He's like, whoa, hold up, bro. He's like, hold up, bro. I'm innocent. And God's like, I know you're innocent. Don't worry. But I'm telling you again, you touch her, it's going down. So, like Max said, sometimes you don't know. Like God can be like speaking to people on your behalf. Like, leave them alone, bro. And then like Max said, they start changing. You're like, yo, God had
what happened? He's nice now.
Yeah. Or even us, like God will speak to us or in a dream, in a vision, and it kind of changes our behavior.
And I've had that happen to me before. I remember there was a friend of mine, when I first moved back to Rhode Island, he was doing the online ministry stuff. And, this is before I was really in my Bible. So I'm still worldly a little bit. And I'm like, I get what Jesus is talking about when he says the prophet will never be accepted in their hometown, because I knew this kid. So it's like, now this kid's a freaking online preacher. Get out of here, bro. So I wasn't buying it. I'm like, get out of here, bro. I'm not here for it. This kid's fake. This kid. And then I had a dream, and what happened to Laban happened to me. In the dream, I see the kid preaching on the street. And even in the dream, I'm like, this kid, bro, fake nigga, man. And then a guy comes up to me in the dream and says, you see that kid right there? I'm like, yeah, him, right? He's like, that's a man of God. And I woke up.
Mm.
Let's just say,
Yep.
let me just say it like this. Me and that guy, we work together in ministry now.
There you go. God is working, man. And that's
Because-
comforting to know. Because like when you're in it, you can just feel like you don't feel like anything is happening. But prayer and worship and those things are being set to God, and God is working. Like God is answering them, God is doing things. You don't always have to know. It's not your job to know. You feel me? But we just know that God is working.
Yeah, I got that rebuke in that dream. He said, that guy right there is a man of God. Rest was history. And after that, I told the kid, I apologized, because I was like, yo, I really, thought you was just bluffing. But I'm like, God revealed you to me in a dream and said, you're a man of God. And I believe God. And then I started working with him. And shortly I started to see, okay, I was wrong about this kid. But I got warned in that dream. Not warned, but I was told in the dream by the angel of the Lord, or an angel of God, not the angel of the Lord, but an angel in the dream, and said, that kid's a man of God. So like Laban and like Abimelech, you see it. God, to your point, when someone's his vessel, he's going to make sure you know about it.
Yeah. I love that protection you get, man. It's better than the security guards that these celebrities have. Man.
Telling you, bro.
It's way better. What does it say? Okay, so it says, why didn't you let me kiss my daughters and grandchildren, tell them goodbye? You have acted very foolishly. I could destroy you, but God, the God of your father, appeared to me last night and warned me, leave Jacob alone. I can understand your feeling that you must go and your intense longing for your father's home, but why have you stolen my gods? It says, I rushed away because I was afraid. Jacob's answered, I thought you would take your daughters from me by force. And I
want to put a point, because I know you're gonna continue to move on, and it'll probably go away from the point. But in the previous verse, in verses 30, he says, God appeared to him and warned him, leave Jacob alone. And he says, I can understand your feeling. No, he says, where's it at? He says, I could destroy you, but the God of your father appeared to me last night and warned me. What's my point? I think as men who have children, it is very important for your children to know your God. Not just in you teaching them, but in them seeing you live this out. Because Jacob, he refers to him as the God of your father, which means even Laban knew this is the God his father worshiped. Because obviously Jacob might have made that known, but this was his father's God, and he believed in his father's God. And I think it's important for fathers, one, to know God, and then teach God to your children and let them see your relationship with God. So in their life, like we can say, we're able to say we believe because of our parents' God. Like we saw them believe in this God that today we now believe in. And I think we have that obligation to continue that for our children, to be able to have that same, opportunity to be able to, like, I know God because of my father and my mother. I know God because of them. So I want to emphasize that for the fathers out there. We have that obligation, like make sure you know God and teach your children God.
That's right. Make sure your household serves the Lord. Make sure they know where the direction is going. Because that, as you said, the father's the leader of the household. And it'll be well known by other people as well. And it says,
but why have you stolen my gods?
Oh yeah, it says, but why have you stolen my gods? I rushed away because I was afraid, Jacob answered. Thought you would take your daughters from me by force, but as for your gods, see if you can find them. and let the person who has taken them die. So that's a powerful word right there.
I think Jared brought that point up last time where he speaks death on his wife.
Yeah, I mean, and
He didn't
he's
know.
unknowingly thinking that his wife is not corrupt in that manner.
This is why you gotta be real careful with what you say.
Yeah. Very, very careful, because there's power. God gave him authority over his wife and his kids, and the word that come out of his mouth has power over what he has authority over. So imagine, and he didn't even know that his wife did that. So that shows you, even if you don't know, your mouth has power.
It says right there, but Jacob did not know that Rachel still had stolen the heifer. So it's a tough game out here, man.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's funny because if he would have known, maybe he would have had more.
He wouldn't have
had more
that.
compassion. And it goes back to what Jesus said. He says, "By how you judge, you will be judged." So he's like, "Yo, kill him." But little does he know.
The same thing with David.
Exactly. Little does he know it's gonna come back on you.
Exactly.
So if he would have had compassion, be like, "Dang, that person made it messed up, but I'll pay whatever to just," you feel me? If he would have had compassion on whoever would have stolen it, maybe that would have changed things. But because he came in with so much power, and he was willing to whatever that person would had to die, and he came back on him.
Yeah, you gotta be careful.
In those instances, it's always good to have compassion.
In the same sense too, one thing I said is Rachel, those sinful acts when you know God, because you got to think about this. So if you're looking at this, okay, Laban is talking about Jacob's father's God. So clearly he's God of Yahweh. He's Yahweh. That's his God. But Laban's God is the idols. Rachel's conflicted. My dad's gods are idols. My husband's God is Yahweh. But clearly she believed in her father's God because she's taking her father's idols. She's taking her father's idols. And not just that, she stole them. And it caught up to her. So now what led Jacob to say what he said? You never know, because there's a Pharisee, and he prophesied about Jesus when he said it's better that one should die than all of them. And it says he wasn't led to say this on his own. That was a spirit that made him he said that by the power of the spirit. And what I'm saying is God punishes sin. Rachel stole her dad's idol. She didn't ask them. And it's an idol. And where was Jacob going? He's going back to he's going back to his land, his father's land.
So he couldn't allow that to continue.
That can't go. So Rachel now got to go. So that's what I'm saying. We still can learn there's power in words, but I also look at this as consequences.
That was God's way. God probably influenced that.
That's what I'm saying. God the punish said Jesus bore the sin of us. We couldn't be saved if Jesus doesn't die. So God punishes sin. She stole, and it's not only that she stole idols. Jacob, your husband's God. Why would you need these false gods? So not only did you stole, but what you stole is paganism. And that can't go where we're going. And two, I got, and then she lied about having a so she's just all over the place. So it's like sin, and false gods can't go where we're going because his God is Yahweh, and God's not sharing this land with false gods. So it's one or the other.
They're gonna have the 12 tribes, and I'm gonna think that God says these influences can't mess up my plan.
They can't. Because what you're gonna see, what does God tell Joshua when he's gonna lead the people of Israel to the promised land? He says, do not copy the customs of those people. He says that's why I'm driving them out. He literally tells Joshua that. And it was Moses who told the people that, like, don't copy the customs. This is why God is driving them out, because of their paganism, their witchcraft, their homosexuality, all this adultery, all that. That's why they're being driven out of the land. And then God said, don't copy them. So to your point, they're going here. We can't have this idol stuff infiltrating the 12 tribe. So she got to go, not only because she stole, but then she also lied. And then Jacob, who has power, like Stanley said, over what's his, and he spoke, if whoever has it, they're going to die. But it started when she stole it.
Yeah.
This is consequences.
Yeah,
It's consequences. It's because even why I can say it's consequences. How does Saul die? He seeked the medium, and then when she called Samuel up, he said, "Because you didn't trust God and you seek the medium, you're gonna die. Because you did this, you passed a law, Saul, that said no one in the land can seek medium. But then when God didn't respond to you,
On time.
you broke the law and seek the medium. Because you did that, you're gonna die. So you see, God punishes sin.
And
when
your
you
sons
know-
are gonna die. And that's another argument. Is just like as a leader throughout the whole Bible, you see if the leader messes up, others pay for it. So
David, even David,
that's what
even
comes from
David's
the
whole
leader.
house because of the leader.
Man.
Yep. So
Man.
it's good. So yeah, and I look at it as this was consequences for sin, as well as showing us that as a father, there's power in your words too.
Right.
And Laban, I guess he searches for it in verse 33. 34, he goes up to Rachel. She
lies.
34 and 35, she lies about having her period. So he stops searching her. And then 36.
Yeah, he lies. And then 36. Then Jacob became very angry and he challenged Laban. What's my crime? So not thinking like that Rachel did anything. He's like, all right, you didn't find anything. What's my crime? So he starts to get bass in his voice now.
Now he's gonna get that in 38.
He got bass now. He's like, yo,
38.
I didn't find that. Now I'm about to
go. And I get it from that standpoint. It's like when somebody accuses you of cheating or lying or stealing, and you didn't know you didn't do it. You're gonna feel some type of way, like, yo, like what the heck, bro? Like I didn't do it. I mean, you go through my stuff, and I already told you I didn't do it.
Like, what's my crime? He demanded. He said, what have I done wrong to make you chase after me as though I were a criminal? You have rummaged through everything I own. Now show me what you found that belongs to you. Set it out here in front of us before you, our relatives, for all to see. Let them judge between us. Says for 40 years I've been with you.
20.
Yeah, for 20 years I've been with you, caring for your flocks. All that time your sheep and goats never miscarried. In all those years, I've never used a single ram of yours for good. If any were attacked for food, if any were attacked and killed by wild animals, I never showed you the carcass and asked you to reduce the count of your flock. No, I took the loss myself. You made me pay for every stolen animal, whether it was taken in broad daylight or in dark of night. So what this shows me is like, keep doing good to the ones that.
But also, I want to make sure I look at it. I mean, we touch it from a different perspective because we have to remember who we're talking about. Jacob, and we're gonna before he gets back to his father there, he's gonna have an encounter with Jesus where he's gonna have his name changed to Israel. So you have to remember Jacob is a deceiver. So he stole the promise, even in the womb. He's from the womb. This guy's stealing, and his brother was for his brother. He tricks his brother. So Jacob was a deceiver, and because now Jacob he has the blessing of his father, he's gonna be the heir to his father's blessings and all these promises. One thing I like about God, God's like, all right, Jacob, you stole it, it's yours. All right, it's yours. But before you get on this platform, buddy, we're gonna get all this out of you. So he sends Jacob to a man he's Jacob 2.0. And when Jacob's gonna be under Jacob 2.0 for 20 years, Jacob's no longer gonna be Jacob anymore. Because look what he says. He didn't cheat Laban because Laban was cheating him. So he learned to be just. He's like, yo, you was doing all this to me, and I was still being just. I'm taking the L's. Yeah, because Jacob, did you forget, buddy? This is what you used to do. He's you, buddy. Take a look. And it's not until you see you sometimes that you can change. Because you meet someone that's literally you, and you're like, yo, I'm like that? Dang.
That's what Jesus says. He says, take the log out of your eye.
That's what's gonna happen. So this 20 years was a process of sanctification, buddy. And we're gonna say in the next chapter, he's gonna have an encounter with Jesus, and he's gonna change his name because now he's changed. Now that you're changed, we're gonna change your name. You're no longer deceiver. You're Israel. You're Israel. So
another.
Go ahead.
I think another point is when Paul says to obey your masters and serve them as you would serve Christ. So, and I think Peter says even if they're doing you wrong, you still have an obligation to work and do a good job. So that's what he does here.
Yep, that's what happened here. God was changing him, and it's like God changes you and me through trials and tribulations and through sufferings. Same thing with Joseph. How was Joseph able to be second in command, prime minister, and be great at it? Because of his sufferings, because of being cheated. That actually prepared him to be who he was. How was David a great king? Because Saul was trying to kill him. He served under Saul. He was a shepherd's boy for his father. That was all preparation for him to be king. And now Jacob's about to go to his father's land and be the heir to his father, and of his father's inheritance and all that. But he had to go through the process of transformation first. And that process of transformation took place for these 20 years that he slaved for Laban and was cheated by Laban and all that. But it changed him. And that we're going to see that in the next chapter where he's going to get a new name.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Let me read first.
Go ahead.
Let me read 1 Peter 2, verse 18. It says, you who are slaves must submit to your masters with all respect. Do what they tell you, not only if they are kind and reasonable, but even if they are cruel. For God is pleased when, conscious of his will, your patient endure unjust treatment. So he said, even if they're cruel, which is what Laban is doing to him, that principle still is consistent.
Yeah, that's good, man. Because it's building character. It is building character, and it is you're enduring. You're showing your humility. You're showing that you're obeying God over everything, and then in due time, God will fight that battle for you. That's beautiful.
And verse 40, he's just telling his issues. I worked for you through the scorching heat of the day and through the cold and sleepless night. Yes, for 20 years I slaved in your house. I worked for 14 years earning the 2 daughters and 6 more years for your flock. And you changed my wages 10 times.
And I want to put a point there too. In James 1, it says, they're starting at verses 2, dear brothers and sisters, when troubles of any kind come your way, consider it an opportunity for great joy. Verse 3, for you know that when your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow. So let it grow, for when your endurance is fully developed, you'll be perfect and complete, needing nothing. And we see in all his persecution that he's going through under Laban, he has these encounters with God in the process, where God is like showing him, I'm with you. He's showing them the striped ones that are sleeping with the women, showing them he's cheating you, but I'm with you. And like God appears to Laban, don't touch him, I'm with you. So even though he's been persecuted, his endurance or his faith is growing through all these trials and errors. His faith is growing in his God, his father's God. Because he's seeing God is looking, this guy's cheating me, but I had this dream last night and God's showing me like, I'm with you. So through all this persecution and all this, he's actually growing in faith in God because he's enduring it, and God gives him those confirmations by all these things. I'm with you. Don't worry. He's not going to cheat you. He's not going to kill you. You're good. So his faith in God is growing through trial and error, and now his endurance is building up as well to endure. And you see, he definitely has some endurance, and he's 20 years. He stayed for 20 years. So now his faith is in God.
Yeah, man.
And then he says in verse, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying, like, that just shows you, like, a lot of times we expect to change in like a year or 3 months, but you see these stories, it takes like time. It takes real time to see
That's why I say
change and to see, like, to endure in their character to switch up. It's that sanctification process is actually a real thing, man. It takes time.
that's why I say
Exactly.
like stay in the moment, man. Because imagine if he's year 2, he's gonna be there for 18 more years. So if you're thinking about if you're
Yeah.
thinking about the end result, like it's gonna
You,
drive you crazy on a day-to-day
yeah,
basis.
it is.
So it's important to stay in your seasons. God wants you to be here. Just stay focused on that because it might take 20 years, and that's just the reality
Yeah.
of
Mm.
it.
And it
Look how
builds
long it
character.
took Abraham to have his kid. It just, I think
And
that
I
was like
remember
20,
I
25 years or
at the
so.
Spanish church that I serve at, their pastor was saying that, when he was a little boy, he was prophesied that he would be a pastor. He's and I'm paraphrasing the age. I don't remember the exact age, but like basically say like he was like 15 when he was prophesied he'd be a pastor. He said, I didn't become a pastor until I was like 41, 42.
Yeah.
So, like you said, like sometimes, yeah, there's an end goal for you, but there might be a process to get you there. Because, like I said, when you represent God, you just go to God's not gonna make you be his representative, and you ain't a good representative of him.
Yeah.
So before I get you out there, I gotta muscle out the kinks in you, get you right, and then we're gonna
Yeah.
put you out there. So that way, when you go out there and you say I'm a man of God, you actually represent me correctly. And like I said, that 20 years of slaving got him right.
Just stay focused in the present. And then verse 42 says, in fact, if the God of my father had not been on my side, the God of Abraham and the fearsome God of Isaac, which is the point you just made, you would have sent me away empty-handed, but God has seen your abuse and my hard work. That is why he appeared to you last night and rebuked you. So I love that he says he has seen your abuse and he has seen my faithfulness. You feel me? But what if he had a bad attitude?
I was just going, oof.
Yeah.
You feel me? What if he had a bad attitude? It wouldn't be that God has seen your abuse and my faithfulness, my hard work. This is why he did that. So once again, what Peter says, we have to heed to it. And listen, that's not an easy thing to do. Very difficult thing to do.
Think about that, man.
Persecution.
Because what you're saying, it even goes to when you talk about salvation. Jesus says those who are in there are going to inherit like houses, mother, brother, all that salvation. But he also says you're going to inherit persecution. And true members of the body of Christ have to endure persecution. You have to. That's a part of this. And the reason why I like what you pointed out is what if this guy didn't endure? What if he had a bad attitude and just screwed Laban? I'm going to treat him back. Guess what happens? You would have missed out on your blessing.
Exactly.
That's literally what the proverb says. Let God handle it. Like Jesus is literally says, they brought him like a criminal and he kept his mouth shut. He kept his case in the hands of God. He gave us an example, like Peter's cutting the guy's ear off. He's like, whoa, you live by the sword.
Yeah.
You won't die by the sword. He says, I could have called for the angels and they'd have came and helped.
They'd have obliterated them.
He's like, chill out, buddy. Chill out. So what I've learned, and like you said, even though God saw Laban's abuse, God's still looking at, okay, Max, what are you doing though? Okay, he's abusing. I see him. You want to know why this is so important, Max? Because it goes back to Adam, right? And Eve. Adam's like, whoa, God, it's Eve's fault. Okay, she brought the fruit, but what did you do? See, Adam, there's no getting out of this, Adam.
No excuse.
She brought the fruit, but what did you do? Did you say no? No, but no, ain't no but. Okay, Eve, the serpent deceived me. Okay, he deceived you. You're right. But what did you do? I don't want to hit you. You had a choice. He was speaking all these cute words, but you still had a choice. So it's the same thing. Jacob, okay, he's acting all up. What do? You see, I was talking to Roger the other day, and I thought it was good because I was able to see like the old me and what Roger did. Roger said at his job, he got fired at his job. I don't know if you guys know this. This is recording. If you're watching this, Roger, forgive me. I'm using you for testimonial. I'm using you for testimonial purposes, brother. They love. So he says he's at the job. He says they hired this new guy, a regular coworker, but this coworker is a douchebag. Roger saying he's being mean. He's just a jerk. He's like, he'll throw trash on the floor and tell them pick it up. He's like, this guy is just obnoxious, but no one's checking him. So now, you see, this is the thing when you're a man of God, they're gonna come for you. So this guy, I guess, he was working in Roger's area, and then he was going through like the stuff, and he threw like everyone's stuff on the floor, including Roger's jacket. Roger was already like fed up with this guy because he's been working on it a couple of weeks. He's like, he already sees how dudes move, so he already wasn't liking this guy. But now he threw Roger's jacket. Roger confronts the guy. He's like, "Yo, bro, why'd you throw my jacket on the floor?" And the guy's like, "What you gonna do?" Now Roger's like, "Bro, like just pick up my jacket. Like let's keep it. You know, guy's like, I ain't picking it up. What you gonna do?" So Roger's like, he squares up, like, "What's up, punk?" Roger's at a 10, ready to fight dude. Now dude's a little scared. So he's like, "Yo," so he snitches, he calls the boss, like, "Yo, this guy Roger's bugging." Guess what happens? Well, long story short, like the next day, the boss shows up, tells Roger, like, "Let me talk to you." What happened? Roger explains it. He tells Roger, "Give me your badge. You're done." Roger's like, "Are you kidding me?" You see, this is the thing. He threw your thing on the floor. That's right. But what did you do? I forgot to tell you. I forgot to tell you because when Roger was about to fight the guy, Roger got so mad. He found the guy's stuff. He told me he picked it up and threw his stuff on the train tracks. Yeah, he found the guy's bag. And he's like, "Yeah, you ain't gonna fight. What's up?" And he took the guy's bag, and he was so mad, he took the guy's bag now and hummed it. But so that's my point.
He took it under his hand. And
it goes back to this.
Yeah.
Jacob, he's like, "Okay, Laban's mistreating me." God sees that, but you still have an obligation. What's a verse you just read on Peter? You still have an obligation, though, to do it right there.
Exactly.
That's crazy.
It's not easy. It's not easy. Especially when you come from being like having pride for yourself and you don't like people disrespecting you. But when Jesus says turn the cheek and when Peter says, "Hey man, even if he's being mean, you still gotta do it."
He threw your stuff, bam. Bam, he threw your stuff.
That's tough, but you gotta swallow, man. That's sanctification. That's the point of getting it wrong and then make sure you get it right next time.
Yeah.
Because it cost him his job. So it obviously wasn't the right decision.
It wasn't worth it, right?
Yeah.
But you look at that. That's the thing that people have to understand. He could do wrong, but you still have an obligation.
You gotta do the right thing. 100%.
Because
man.
I look at it as like I look at it as like if you had two sons, one was a older son and one was like a little 3-year-old toddler. The 3-year-old toddler could get away with things. And the one who's more mature has to swallow it up. Because if
you know better.
You know better. It's the same thing. We're more spiritually mature. God expects more from us.
Exactly.
You know, and the one that's not spiritually mature, he can kind of get away with doing stuff.
Remember,
he's not gonna get away with it.
He won't get away, but
remember, as a child of God, you don't play.
But you gotta understand, like,
take it at your own risk.
It goes back to that. Someone could read the story of Adam and Eve and the serpent and say, "Yo, Adam doesn't deserve to be punished. He's innocent in your eyes." But God looks at it and says, "Okay, the serpent deceived Eve. Eve brought you the fruit. But what did you do?" That's the thing. This is what I said. You start to see with God. This is why I love the Bible doesn't lie. God is a just judge. He's fair. He ain't playing. He ain't no favorites here. Jacob, you're my guy, but I'm watching you too. He's mistreating you, but he's just.
Oh yeah.
You see, the serpent deceived Eve. Eve brought the fruit. God was just. You're punished. You're punished, and you're punished. He didn't say that Adam, you're right. No favoritism.
No, that's the same thing with. You can see that in the government, like that story you just gave us, where the dude had his son in a daycare and he got abused or whatever.
Exactly.
He retaliates.
That's tough.
And now he's gonna serve life in jail.
That's tough.
It's
but because you still have obligation to do right, even when they do wrong. Because this guy, he might get prison time and might get 4 years for what he did, but you're looking at life because you attempted murder. Mind you, I get it.
And what the world exactly, the world's gonna be like, "Nah, he had right to do it," but at the end of the day, you're still gonna pay the penalty. You're gonna be right in prison.
Yeah.
So in the end, it's never worth it.
So if
All
there's
right.
anything we can take from what Jacob did,
When they do
he
wrong, you do right.
endured.
Yeah, he let God fight his battles.
He endured. Because if he would have done his own thing, he would have screwed everything.
And this is the good thing about being spiritually mature. I've seen proof after proof after proof of God vindicating his people. So when I'm touched, if I'm ever touched, I'm like, yo, like you might be in trouble. You're in big trouble, buddy. And I believe that. I truly believe it. So it's just like that helps me not take it into my own hands, because I truly believe that if I'm touched incorrectly, that God will handle it. And when God handles it, like you said, he's gonna. Your kids might pay for it, and your family might pay for it.
It's bad.
Next generation might pay for it, depending on what you do. So,
So I think that's the word that whoever's watching this, they may be doing wrong. Do right. You know, I remember I learned that with my unforgiveness that I used to have in my heart towards my brother, my dad. You know, when I started reading my Bible, I realized, JR, you still have an obligation to have to forgive. There's no but. God, ain't no but. They killed my son, fam. Fam.
Yeah.
I get. You see, a lot of times we think God don't get it. I get it. They killed my son, fam.
Yeah,
fam.
Sure.
Yeah, you were bullied, but they killed my son, and they didn't just
they killed him unjustly.
Yeah, they killed him in the worst way. They just put a bullet in his head. They made him suffer. So, fam, I get it.
And when you talk about being unjustly persecuted, well, think about it. Jesus was unjustly persecuted. So he doesn't want to hear that.
Yeah. So I think I learned that you have an obligation to still do good, even when they do wrong. And like you said, that's a prayer that you got to ask God to help you here. But I would advise any person who's a Christian to don't take matters into your own hands, because if you do, then don't expect God to come in the situation on your behalf, because you clearly took care of it. You took it. You handled
it. A lot of it is for your protection too, because I've heard some things in the news where like there's some road rage, and then the person, you know, that the person that has some mental problem or something is basically pulling over and shooting the other person in the car.
You got to be careful with road rage.
Yeah, it's like
or any kind of interaction.
Like
you could get shot at the park.
Exactly. Yeah, they cut you off. Just be God is good. God is with you, man. Like, you know what I mean? You don't have to flick them off because they might have a bad day. It's for your protection in the end. You know what I'm saying? I think that's a biblical thing, and you see God will handle it in the later half, you know, in their lives. But for you, you just gotta understand God's fighting your battles, and you're under his protection. But the second you step out of that protection, you got what's coming for you. That's what, and that's the beautiful lesson we learn here with Jacob, is like, he suffered even though, you know, it wasn't sweet, but God had his back all the way through the end and gave him the cue to go when it was time to go.
And you see, God doesn't change, because it's the same story for David, for Joseph, for Jesus, and on and on and on.
Israelites in Egypt.
Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, it's the same story. God doesn't change. If you do your part, trust God, even when you're wrong, you take the wrong. God always does. He does this. He's the same God. He will vindicate you. He will show whether he vindicates you in this life or in the next life. He's going to vindicate you. Be patient.
100%. I think you could knock out the last part.
All right, here we go.
Jacob's treaty with Laban. Then Laban replied to Jacob, "These women are my daughters. These children are my grandchildren, and these flocks are my flocks. In fact, everything you see is mine. But what can I do now about my daughters and their children? So come, let's make a covenant, you and I, and it will be a witness to our commitment." So Jacob took a stone and set it up as a monument. Then he told his family members, "Gather some stones." So they gathered stones and piled them in a heap. Then Jacob and Laban sat down beside the pile of stones to eat a covenant meal. To commemorate the event, Laban called the place Jegar Sahadutha, which means witness pile in Aramaic, and Jacob called it Galid, which means witness pile in Hebrew. Then Laban declared, This pile of stones will stand as a witness to remind us of the covenant we have made today. This explains why it was called Galid, witness pile. But it was also called Mitzvah, which means watchtower. For Laban said, may the Lord keep watch between us to make sure that we keep this covenant when we are out of each other's sight. If you mistreat my daughters, or if you marry other wives, God will see it even if no one else does. He is a witness to this covenant between us. See this pile of stones, Laban continued, and see this monument I have set between us. They stand between us as witnesses of our vows. I will never pass this pile of stones to harm you, and you must never pass these stones or this monument to harm me. I call on the God of our ancestors, the God of your grandfather Abraham and the God of my grandfather Nahor, to serve as a judge between us. So Jacob took an oath before the fearsome God of his father Isaac to respect the boundary line. Then Jacob offered a sacrifice to God there on the mountain and invited everyone to a covenant feast. After they had eaten, they spent the night on the mountain. Laban got up early the next morning, and he kissed his grandchildren and his daughters and blessed them. Then he left and returned home.
This is basically about the covenant that they make.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys have anything important throughout this whole thing.
Yeah, the only thing that stands out to me, which is very interesting, it goes to show you that Laban, and you still see this happen today, there are some people who pray to God and believe in God, but they also believe in other gods. Don't forget that the idols that Rachel took were her dad's other gods. But now this covenant, he's making this covenant using the name of Yahweh. Like he's making this covenant with Jacob's God, but he also includes his other God, because he says the God of your grandfather Abraham, the God of my grandfather Nahor, which I'm guessing would still be God, because it's an uppercase G. But my point is
the same, because Abraham and Nahor, I believe, are brothers. I believe.
No,
Yeah.
Nahor was Rebecca's grandfather. Nahor would have been Sarah's dad, if I'm correct, or would that have been Abraham's?
I believe Nahor is Abraham's brother.
Yeah,
check that.
Yeah, it's Abraham's brother. Exactly, you're correct.
Yeah, so it's the same God.
So the same God. But what I'm saying though is he still had other gods he worshiped. Because when you see it says in Genesis 31, starting at verses 19, it says Rachel stole her father's household idols and took them with her. And when Laban catches up to Jacob in verses 30, he says, I can understand your feeling that you must go and your intense longing for your father's home. But look what he says. But why have you stolen my gods? Lowercase g.
Mm-hmm.
So he had lowercase gods, but he also believed in God. And I think people have to understand there's only one God, but someone who's serving lowercase gods and God, you're of the devil, because there can't be no in between. I can't be, and the reality is there's people like this. I've met people, this is their problem. They're like, when things are going good, I believe in God.
Mm-hmm.
But once things are going bad, God's not good, man. Why would God take that person from me? Why would God make this happen? And then all of a sudden, God's this bad guy. And then they're atheists. I've had people tell me that. Yeah, I struggle because as soon as things go bad, it doesn't make sense. If God loves me, why is it going bad? So you see, people like that, they're wishy-washy. They're like the wind. 1 minute they're in, they're out. That's this guy. He has idol gods, but now he's making a covenant. He knows I gotta do it with this guy.
Mm-hmm.
You gotta understand, if you come to be a Christian, it's God, it's Yahweh, and that's it. In the good times and the bad times. It's like a marriage. That's why the Bible says Christ in the church is what marriage is a representation of. Meaning, what do people say when they're getting married? For good times, bad times, for better, for worse, for sickness and health. You have to have God as your only God, even when it's good and when it's bad, not these idols, and I just wanted to point that out because you see this guy was like that. He had two separate gods. He had the God he believed in, but he also had lowercase g gods. And in a New Testament perspective, someone like that is not of God. You can't have one foot in and one foot out.
Can't
There has to be
worship
both feet
God
in.
and the devil at the same time. Either you
Yeah.
love one or you despise the other. Jesus said you cannot serve two masters.
So
And
that was what
I wanted
to
to put a pin there because we need to know what kind of worship is acceptable to God. How do I know that I have God, right? It's basically when it's like what you give your undivided attention to, right? If we go to Romans, where is it? Romans 12, verses 1, I believe. It says, and so, dear brothers and sisters, I plead with you to give your bodies to God because of all he has done for you. Let them be let them be a living and holy sacrifice, the kind he will find acceptable. This is truly the way to worship him. I say that because a lot of times we're supposed to give our whole self, right? We're supposed to give everything, not part, not half, not a quarter, not 99%, all of it. And that's what shows that you're truly making God your God, the one God. When you have part of, I go to Sundays every week. I mean, I go to church every Sunday, and I worship God there, but Monday to Friday, on Monday, I got a different God. On Tuesday, I got a different God. And you might not publicly say it's your God, but your actions tell it. It basically tells on
actions speak louder than words.
Yeah, your actions tell like, hey, yeah, this is the time I put in, God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit is not really part of my life on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. But on Sunday, yes, I'm in church and doing all this, but on Monday, it's more like Monday Night Football's on, and I gotta party and prepare, and that's, you're treating that as your God if you didn't know that. Or like, I'm always on my phone, social media. You can treat that as your God. So I just wanted to make that new that translation of, how he had these little statue gods, but in this day and age, it can be the thing you put a lot of your
this could be someone's statue God right here.
Yes.
And remember, Paul says a greedy person is an idolater, loving
worshiping the things of this world.
So if you have, once it goes back to selfishness. If everything is about you, then you're worshiping your car, worshiping your house, you're worshiping your jewelry. Your greed has become your God.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I think that's good that you did that, because we're reading Old Testament, but we need to make sure, if for the person watching this, that you translate it in a New Testament perspective, and you did good with that one. So yeah, I think that's all there is there.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much everything.
Cool. So we'll go to the next section.
Yeah, I'd say let it play 1 to 21, because 32 is like 1 and 2, and then I'd say let it go to 21.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Chapter 32. As Jacob started on his way again, angels of God came to meet him. When Jacob saw them, he exclaimed, "This is God's camp." So he named the place Mahanaim. Jacob sends gifts to Esau. Then Jacob sent messengers ahead to his brother Esau, who was living in the region of Seir in the land of Edom. He told them, "Give this message to my master Esau. Humble greetings from your servant Jacob. Until now, I have been living with Uncle Laban, and now I own cattle, donkeys, flocks of sheep and goats, and many servants, both men and women. I have sent these messengers to inform my lord of my coming, hoping that you will be friendly to me." After delivering the message, the messengers returned to Jacob and reported, "We met your brother Esau, and he is already on his way to meet you with an army of 400 men. Jacob was terrified at the news. He divided his household, along with the flocks and herds and camels, into 2 groups. He thought, if Esau meets one group and attacks it, perhaps the other group can escape. Then Jacob prayed, "O God of my grandfather Abraham and God of my father Isaac, O Lord, you told me, return to your own land and to your relatives. And you promised me, I will treat you kindly. I am not worthy of all the unfailing love and faithfulness you have shown to me, your servant. When I left home and crossed the Jordan River, I owned nothing except a walking stick. Now my household fills 2 large camps. O Lord, please rescue me from the hand of my brother Esau. I am afraid that he is coming to attack me, along with my wives and children. But you promised me, I will surely treat you kindly, and I will multiply your descendants until they become as numerous as the sands along the seashore, too many to count. Jacob stayed where he was for the night. Then he selected these gifts from his possessions to present to his brother Esau: 200 female goats, 20 male goats, 200 ewes, 20 rams, 30 female camels with their young, 40 cows, 10 bulls, 20 female donkeys, and 10 male donkeys. He divided these animals into herds and assigned each to different servants. Then he told his servants, go ahead of me with the animals, but keep some distance between the herds. He gave these instructions to the men leading the first group. When my brother Esau meets you, he will ask, whose servants are you? Where are you going? Who owns these animals? You must reply, they belong to your servant Jacob, but they are a gift for his master Esau. Look, he is coming right behind us. Jacob gave the same instructions to the second and third herdmen, and to all who followed behind the herds. You must say the same thing to Esau when you meet him. And be sure to say, look, your servant Jacob is right behind us. Jacob thought, I will try to appease him by sending gifts ahead of me. When I see him in person, perhaps he will be friendly to me. So the gifts were sent on ahead, while Jacob himself spent that night in the camp.
I want to make this point because we're going to see in the next chapter, the last chapter we'll record, Esau's not going to want any of his gifts. He doesn't want any of them. I'm going ahead, but I need to do that to make my point. One thing that I've learned, and I think we've all agreed, God doesn't need your help. What's the key? He reminds God of what God said to him. Look what he says in verses 9. Jacob prayed, O God of my grandfather Abraham and God of my father Isaac. O Lord, look what he says. You told me, return to your own land and to your relatives. And you promised me I will treat you kindly. The end. If God promised you return to your land, and he promised I'm going to treat you kindly, just like Laban couldn't touch you, Esau can't touch you. But Jacob is still battling with the idea of this, because you've seen the same thing with Abraham. You've seen it with the disciples, where like they're seeing Jesus do all these miracles and their faith is kind of growing. But even when Jesus dies, they tell Thomas, we've seen him. I don't believe. Jesus is Thomas.
After everything I've done.
I walked on water. I woke up like Thomas. I said I was going to raise in 3 days, and they told you, you still don't believe.
That's
Philip said, Jesus, he said, hold up. Philip says, show us your father will believe. Jesus
He's
says,
like,
Philip, have I been with you all this time and you still don't know? He says, if you see me, you've seen him. What's my point? God has already promised Jacob, go. Okay, go to your fathers, go to your relatives. Not just that, I'm going to treat you kindly. But even though God, and we make those mistakes sometimes too. I'm going to just be honest. In this faith journey and this sanctification process, sometimes it's a little scary.
Right.
And you're like, God, I remember, did you take a, yeah, JR, I said that. So trust me. And he's fighting it. He didn't, I'm going to call it for what it is. He didn't fully believe or trust in this moment. Because there's some moments we do trust God's promise, like Peter, right? He did trust Jesus for a moment to walk on water. But then at some point, he stopped trusting.
Yeah,
so he's trusting,
terrifying.
Then he's not trusting. See, we got to get to a point, and this is why I say those trials and tribulations are so needed, because we could only see God through them, and that's what builds our faith. And Jacob, He just came from having Laban chase him down and tell him, God told me I can't touch you. That should have been enough for him to know, well, this guy's more powerful than Esau. This guy, he can't touch me because God talked to him. Then Esau can't do that. But nope. He stops believing it for a moment. And he said, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to appease him with all these gifts. And you're going to see in the next chapter, Esau's like, I don't want none of this. I'm good. I have all my stuff. And that's the proof. He didn't have to do that because God's hand of protection was already on you, which means even if Esau wanted to touch you, he couldn't, just like Laban. And I think we as people of God have to get to a point where we hold on and actually believe the promises of God. God says, if I'm for you, who can be against you?
And I love that point because you pointed out Peter walking on water. And as soon as he sees the terrifying waves, it messes up his faith. So God tells Jacob to leave, but it says in verse 6, after delivering the message, the messengers returned, and Jacob reported, we met your brother Esau, and he already on his way to meet you with an army of 400 men. And then it says Jacob was terrified at the news. So now he divides his household because now he's like, I know what God said, but let me hey, if this don't happen like I think it's gonna happen, let me at least try to save something. So like God tells him something, and then he becomes fear causes him to lose some faith. But I love what he did though. Because when he was scared, he went to prayer. And although he still like
he prayed, but then he deviated.
Yeah, he still sent the gift. But it's still good that he went to prayer. Like, yo, like I'm feeling like this. And it's human. Listen, we're not perfect, bro. So like I've probably been into these situations where God tells me something, I see the circumstance, I get fearful, and I go to prayer. And then I'm battling between trusting God and seeing if I can do it myself. So I think it's kind of the same thing with him. He's like, let me try to do these things, but God, like, yo, I'm kind of scared right now. Like, but that's still good. I'm happy he went to prayer and he holds God accountable to his word. He says, you told me return to your own land and to your relatives, and you promised me I will treat you kindly. So you got to hold God to this. And this is why it's important to know the scriptures, because sometimes you're going to have to be like Moses and like Jesus. But God, you said, or when Jesus was battling with Satan, but God said, so sometimes you have to have that in your arsenal. And that's why Hebrews says the word of God is like a sword. It's
sharp. It's sharper than a double-edged. It's the word of God is sharper than a double-edged sword, cutting through bone marrow,
and then it says joint. The armor of God, and that's your sword, that's your offense.
Yeah, Paul writes in Ephesians 6, the word of God is your weapon in the spirit. And what I'm saying to you is why I'm saying as Christians, it's so important for us to have to read the Bible and learn from these stories, is because in certain scenarios, you not trusting God can cost you. Can I prove it? God, he told Abraham and Sarah, you're going to have a son. He said it, it's a promise, it's a word, it's going to happen. But when it got like, okay, I don't think it's going to happen, they said, let's go. Yeah, go sleep with Hagar. She'll produce the son. And then Hagar, when the angel of the Lord met Hagar, what did he say your son's going to be? As wild as an untamed donkey. And he's going to live in open hostility against his relatives. So you guys created a monster because of your lack of trust. So what I'm saying is just, we got to be very, even when you talk about Lot and his wife, the angel said, go and don't look back. All right, Lot listened. His wife looked back, turned to a pillar of salt, and Jesus used her as an example in the book of Gospel of Luke. He said, remember, if you hold on to your life, you'll lose it. Remember Lot's wife. So what I'm saying is sometimes we got to trust God, because if you don't, now granted, God had grace for this guy. This situation wasn't as bad as Abraham, where he produced something that was bad. But what I'm saying is, we've seen examples in the Bible when you don't trust God, sometimes it comes back to bite you. It comes back to bite you. And David, same thing. God gave him the kingdom, he gave him all this, and then I don't know why he deviated, obviously sinful nature, but you get my point. It cost him in the end. His house was divided. because of, not trusting the word of God, which is adultery, and God already given them so much. So what I'm saying is, that's what I take from this is just if God tells you something, I understand sometimes you look in what God said and you look at your reality and you're saying, how in the world is what God said to me about, because you think about Abraham and Sarah, we're getting old. In fact, I'm 100. There's no way. Yeah, don't look at your circumstance. All you gotta know is we serve a supernatural living God. He can do the impossible. If he said you're gonna go to your father's land, even if Esau's gonna kill you, he can't kill you until you get there. And the last time I checked, buddy, you're not there yet. So even if he comes and he's gonna kill you, he can't kill you until you get there anyways. You're gonna make it. So the reality is we gotta stand on the promises of God. And I know it's easier said than done, but like you said, that's why we gotta pray and keep on praying and ask God to help us trust him.
And I love where verse 10, he said, he just brings up his humility. He says, I own nothing except a walking stick. My household is big. He fills up 2 camps. So I think we spoke about that last time, just remembering where we came from. And then verse 11 and 12, he goes on to say, Lord, please rescue me from the hand of my brother Esau. I am afraid, and he is coming to attack me along with my wives and children. But you promised me, I will surely treat you kindly, and I will multiply your descendants until they become numerous as the sand of the seashore, too many to count. So he goes to God with his anxiety, and he holds God accountable to his word. Now, obviously, he still was double-minded to a degree, but I just love the fact that he went to pray.
Yeah, and what I'm seeing here is, fear. Man, fear can make you do something.
That's why I said never move off of fear. Never move.
Yeah, and I think it's beautiful because fear comes in and shows you your faith muscle. How strong is your faith muscle? It's really good. Fear comes in and says fear is gonna come. You're human, but it's like testing your faith muscles. Like, can you bench 315? Let's see.
Okay.
Can you do it?
Humility. In Jesus' name. In Jesus' name.
Exactly. It's like it's gonna test you, and depending on the action you do, it's gonna be like, all right. But I think that's the beautiful thing about the sanctification process is like, yes, you can be human. You're allowed to be human.
Yeah, there's grace in the process.
There's grace in the process. Yes, I can make my own provision and see that it was worthless of me putting that effort in. I learned that next time, don't waste your energy.
Exactly.
Let God do, because like God will show me, hey, I put all this energy in and I thought I was doing something. I really did nothing to help God. And like JR point, which is a great point, is like he's out here putting out this mastermind plan like we all try to do in our lives. And then God says, scrap that. God scrapped that. That was pretty. That was nice. And I get out the way. Let me my thing. I've seen that countless amount of times. You put this nice grand scheme plan together, think you do, and God says, "Get out the way, brother. I got you." But you learn something out that you learn that really it's not you, man. It's God.
It's God.
But I don't care, man. I welcome fear. Fear is gonna test what we about, man. That muscle you've been flexing.
No, it's true. Because what you're saying is true, because when you think about Jesus and his 3-year ministry to disciples, he allowed fear to test them, to show them, and it showed them their faith wasn't there. Because when they were wind in the waves, all the disciples are trembling because they're like, "Yo, master, don't you care that we're gonna drown?" And then Jesus gets up and rebukes the winds. They're like, "Who is this man that even the winds and waves obey him?" But he would allow fear to test them. And that was showing them where their faith is at. And he would always tell them, "Yo, you have little faith." But he would allow them, and that's what you said. God, even in our lives, like you said, all of us have experienced scenarios. I remember with me during COVID, when it first reached its apex, my job has no work. You remember Stanley? I called you, like, "Yo, Stanley, I need to pay my rent. I'm gonna get evicted." Then I still have no money, and now my job has no work. The job that was gonna hire me says they're not gonna take me no more. Fear for me, Mac, is at a high as a ceiling. I'm drowning in fear. I'm like, what am I about to do? And then that's when God convicted me with the word and said, bro, because at that time I had been reading my Bible. So God's like, buddy, I thought you believe. And I'm like, dang. I'm like, yo, I got no faith. Because it hit me that moment, like, yo, I've been reading all these scriptures. Now it's time to put your money where your mouth is. You have faith, right? And I realized, wow, I didn't really have faith. And I could say that. I realized, yo, I don't have faith. Because I called Stanley. Now I'm applying for 2,000 jobs on Indeed every day, calling them like 3 times a day, you get my application. It's like, dang, bro. Mind you, God ends up making provision. I go basically the whole year, don't pay rent because of rent relief. But that was after the fact. I ended up going 7 months, Max, without paying rent. That was before I got the rent relief. So at this point, I'm living on faith now. 7 months, not paying rent. They put eviction notices. And then in the month of March was when COVID reached the apex. So January and February, in the beginning of March, COVID wasn't like global yet. So I'm getting these eviction letters on my door. But at this point, I remember God used my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time. She said, I was worshiping. God told me to give you this word. You're not going to get evicted. And that was in the month of February. And that gave me peace because I'm like, I'm going to believe that. And then February comes again. So now I'm a month behind. March 1st comes. I'm up 2 months behind. And now they're putting eviction notices on my door. I'm like, listen, my wife said, God said. And I said, I know her. She would not, because she's very humble in spirit. I knew, and that's why it's so important to have people in your life who you know have a relationship with God. Because like, if Max calls me or Stanley calls me confirming something or saying a word that God gave them, for me, I'm gonna, and the Bible, John says, don't scoff at prophecy, discern it, hold on to what's true and what's good. This is why you need godly people in your life, because sometimes God can use them to confirm certain things. And she said to me, God said. And I said, I know she wouldn't have said God said if she wasn't sure. So I'm like, this eviction notice, I don't know about you later, but you ain't evicting me because God said. And guess what? I'm in that apartment to this day. Come on, bro.
Good. Glory to God.
So I've learned faith, but I can say, like Jacob, I was petrified. I'm not gonna hide that. I was petrified. My faith was exposed. It was non-existent. But God, like Jacob, gave me grace and it reminded me, buddy, don't worry, I'm with you. And then I was like, okay. And then that built my faith. So, and then you're going to see this is going to build his faith. So that's why I said there's grace in the process of you getting that faith.
And I think the rest of it is, oh, you have something else?
I was just going to say, I think that we all as Christians go through that. Like, how else are we supposed to have a testimony? Or how else are we supposed to have that breakthrough faith? We have to have that moment when we're in the trenches with God. It was just us and God. No one could bail us out, and that you hold on to that. And I think you can see that with Jacob. And I think what you see is like, we're human, man. So we're going to have fear. But the lesson you can take out of it is hold on to the truth, that truth of that promise that God gives you. They call it the belt of truth, right? And the body of Christ, put that belt on, you hold on to that, because that's all you got. In a lot of the cases, pretty much all the cases, it's the word of God, which is the truth. You hold on to it and you let it carry you through. And faith is a muscle, man. It's not something you just say, oh, I have faith. Like, the fear is going to show you if you have faith. And I think once you get through that path, even if you failed horribly, you could always look back at it and see, like, God still carried me to victory.
It's good.
And then you start building that faith, like, wow, you know what I'm saying? I should have faith now. So that's pretty much all I got. But yeah, man, that was a good little thing that the Holy Spirit led you to, J.R. Good to see that.
And then I think the rest of it is his gifts, and he divides his household and his crops. He sends out the gifts, and then the end of it, verse 21, he says, so the gifts. No, he's in verse 20. He says, Jacob thought, I will try to appease him by sending gifts ahead of me, and when I see him in person, perhaps he'll be friendly to me. So just him just trying to butter up his brother.
And I think that's one thing we should never do. Don't try to kiss up to anybody. Know your worth.
Mhm.
because he ends
Yeah.
up calling Esau his master. He was never
He's
your
so
master.
scared. He's so
Yeah, he
scared.
was never. He's like, yeah, tell him your servant. You're tell my master. It's like fear can make you do dumb things. I'm living proof of that. Fear can make fear can make you do dumb things, bro.
That is
Be
right.
honest, bro. Fear can make you do dumb things, and you look back and say, I did that. Wow.
Right.
Why did knock out the last part of this?
All right, here we go.
Jacob wrestles with God. During the night, Jacob got up and took his 2 wives, his 2 servant wives, and his 11 sons, and crossed the Jabbok River with them. After taking them to the other side, he sent over all his possessions. This left Jacob all alone in the camp. And a man came and wrestled with him until the dawn began to break. When the man saw that he would not win the match, he touched Jacob's hip and wrenched it out of its socket. Then the man said, "Let me go, for the dawn is breaking." But Jacob said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." "What is your name?" the man asked. He replied, "Jacob." "Your name will no longer be Jacob," the man told him. "From now on, you will be called Israel, because you have fought with God and with men and have won. Please tell me your name," Jacob said. "Why do you want to know my name?" the man replied. Then he blessed Jacob there. Jacob named the place Peniel, which means face of God, for he said, "I have seen God face to face, yet my life has been spared." The sun was rising as Jacob left Peniel, and he was limping because of the injury to his hip. Even today, the people of Israel don't eat the tendon near the hip socket because of what happened that night when the man strained the tendon of Jacob's hip.
Jacob wrestles with God.
Nigga faded for Jesus, bro.
and Jesus rips his socket, and then I guess they were
Faded
fighting. They were fighting all
Yeah.
night.
It's like Jesus was in his bodily form.
Exactly. That's why, and he emphasizes that. He says, "For you have," Jesus says to him, "From now on, you will be called Israel because you have fought with God and with man." And remember, Jesus was 100% God and 100% man.
Yeah.
Don't forget that.
So he's in his earthly form at this point, and I guess Jacob was giving him a run for his money, and he showed his power by touching his hip. So he uses power to disjoint his hip, and therefore making Jacob a little kind of crippled in that area.
And then it was interesting. He said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me," because sometimes you gotta fight for that blessing.
Mm-hmm.
And then he changes his name to Israel, and I think we spoke about this before. His name had to be changed because of the legacy he was gonna be the 12 tribes. He can't be the 12 tribes of deceivers. He has to be the 12 tribes of God fights, or Israel. So God had to change his name.
Because your name is who you are. And I've talked about how people have to understand, when you look at the names of God, they all have a meaning. You guys have this book. If you ever get a chance, look up those names. Israel. Look up the name Jedediah, Josiah. Look up, the name Elijah. They all have meanings, significant meanings. Look up Yeshua, obviously Jesus. We know all that. Emmanuel. All these names have meanings. Melchizedek. And the reality is, his name was Deceiver, and that's what he did. So parents, I always say, have to be very careful and make sure that you don't just name your kid anything. Pray about names. Let the name you name your child, be spirit led, because the name you give your child is what he is. It's like legal rights. I remember I had a book of a man, a pastor. He gave me this book. He had a testimony where he went to a Dominican Republic and he was trying to cast a demon out of a woman. And he said the woman, the demon in her began to speak to him and said, I'm not going anywhere because I have legal rights. And he says, how? He says, because her name is Jezebel. So the reality is, he was like, what he learned from that is, and that's why when I read this story, it began to make sense to me. Because I'm like, Jesus changed his name from Jacob, which meant deceiver, to Israel. So the reality is names have great significance. You're going to see in the book of Luke, Gabriel tells Zechariah, name the boy John. You have to name the boy John. So the reality is God was the one who said, name the boy John. And there's a reason, and I forget what John means. I'll read it. But again, it's a name of significance as well. But God wanted the boy's name to be John. And that's, like I said, there's reasons. Names have significance. John means Jehovah favored. So the favor of God was going to be on John's life. And because the favor of God is going to be on John's life, that's why his name is John, because that's what John means. And John had favor. And he was born with the Holy Spirit. Don't forget that. So he had favor. He had favor. So the reality is this guy's name was changed because what his name represent was literally who he was. So I think that's all I have there.
And then it says, and then he had this hip injury, and then there's a custom to not eat the tendon near the hip socket that Israel does.
And I feel like there's significance that I'm gonna probably meditate on that. Why he ripped his hip out. I feel like there's significance to that because after he rips the hip out, he then changes his name. And I really want to look into that because like everything God does, there's an intent to it. If he did that, there's a reason. And I don't know if that was because he had to change his name. I don't know, but like, why did he take a rib out of Adam to make Eve? So every time God does something, there's always a meaning behind it. Right now, I can't really see it, but I wanna like meditate on this and see if God will give me understanding. But I know that has to be
25. It says that he was no match for him, so he touched his hip and wrenched it out of the socket. So I guess when they were fighting, he was like, he's overpowering me, so I got to do something. But like you said, maybe there is
not overpowering Jesus guy.
No, that's what it says here.
I'm just joking, Jane. I said it. That's it.
I ain't calling Jesus a softy now. That's what it says here. Because he was not gonna win the match, and he had to hit him with the hip.
That's crazy, bro. Jacob must have been swole.
Real swole, like real strong.
It's a big guy, bro.
Yeah.
Well, let's knock out the chapter 33. It's just 20 verses.
All right, here we go.
Chapter 33. Jacob and Esau make peace. Then Jacob looked up and saw Esau coming with his 400 men. So he divided the children among Leah, Rachel, and his 2 servant wives. He put the servant wives and their children at the front, Leah and her children next, and Rachel and Joseph last. Then Jacob went on ahead. As he approached his brother, he bowed to the ground 7 times before him. Then Esau ran to meet him and embraced him, threw his arms around his neck and kissed him, and they both wept. Then Esau looked at the women and children and asked, "Who are these people with you?" "These are the children God has graciously given to me, your servant," Jacob replied. Then the servant wives came forward with their children and bowed before him. Next came Leah with her children, and they bowed before him. Finally, Joseph and Rachel came forward and bowed before him. "And what were all the flocks and herds I met as I came?" Esau asked. Jacob replied, "They are a gift, my lord, to ensure your friendship." "My brother, I have plenty," Esau answered. "Keep what you have for yourself." But Jacob insisted, "No, if I have found favor with you, please accept this gift from me. And what a relief to see your friendly smile. It is like seeing the face of God. Please take this gift I have brought you. For God has been very gracious to me. I have more than enough." And because Jacob insisted, Esau finally accepted the gift. "Well," Esau said, "let's be going. I will lead the way." But Jacob replied, "You can see, my lord, that some of the children are very young, and the flocks and herds have their young too. If they are driven too hard, even for one day, all the animals could die. Please, my lord, go ahead of your servant. We will follow slowly at a pace that is comfortable for the livestock and the children. I will meet you at Seir. All right, Esau said, but at least let me assign some of my men to guide and protect you. Jacob responded, that's not necessary. It's enough that you've received me warmly, my lord. So Esau turned around and started back to Seir that same day. Jacob, on the other hand, traveled on to Succoth. There he built himself a house and made shelters for his livestock. That is why the place was named Succoth, which means shelters. Later, having traveled all the way from Padan Aram, Jacob arrived safely at the town of Shechem in the land of Canaan. There he set up camp outside the town. Jacob bought the plot of land where he camped from the family of Hamor, the father of Shechem, for 100 pieces of silver. And there he built an altar and named it El Elohe Israel.
That means God, the God of Israel.
And that's why you go to see the names is what the thing is. He built an altar, named it God, the God of Israel. You look at verses 17. It says there he built himself a house and made shelters for his livestock. That is why the place was named Succoth, which means shelters. So your name is who you are. So that is why people have to really make sure your names that you name your kid, pray about that, because whatever you name him, that's what he is. Who he is, who he represents, that's what it is. But what do we see here?
So the first 4 chapters is him dividing his household, and Rachel, his favorite, Joseph, is the last in the back. So I think we were speaking about that before. He probably, if all goes wrong, they'll probably die last because those are his favorites. And then he bows to Esau, and then he kissed, and they both wept.
Because then he bows 7 times, and it goes, like I said, back to what I said. He's calling him his Lord. He's bowing before him. He got the servants bowing, but it wasn't something he had to do, because the reality was this was his brother. But fear, because fear caused him to do that.
Yep. And I think 5, 6, and 7 just show that they are bowing in front of Esau. His family's bowing in front of Esau.
And verses 5, I want to point out, when Esau asked him, who are these people with you? He says, these are the children God has graciously given to me, your servant. And I think we all have to understand that children are a gift from God. Children is not because it's kind of crazy in this process that I'm in, with my wife. We still don't have any children. People will talk to me and they'll be trying to give you every method to have a kid. They'll be like, oh, you gotta do it like 10 times a day, man, for 3 straight months. I'm like, bro, but obviously it's not spiritual, so I have to have grace. But I'm like, bro, you guys do understand it's not anything you're doing. Yeah, you play a part, don't get me wrong, but God's the one that makes it land. God's the one that scores, not you. Because if you were the one that scored, then every single time a man slept with a woman, she get pregnant every time. But why doesn't she get pregnant every time? That's proof it's not you. Yeah. So the thing, it's like same thing. Paul says, I can plant, Apollos water, but only God makes it grow. So we have to understand that children is not because you know how to have sex really good. Children is God. And I'm glad he emphasizes that God's grace is why I have these children. So,
I think
bothers me.
Verse 8, 9, 10, and 11 is just him talking about the gift. Esau says he doesn't need it, but Jacob insists that he takes it. And then in verse 11, it says, please take this gift I have brought to you, for God has been very generous to me, so I have more than enough. Because Jacob insisted, Esau finally accepted the gift. So it's not something he wanted.
Yeah, you can say it wasn't because God was like, do it, because if it was, Esau would have just took it. But you see in verses 8, Jacob replied, they are a gift, my Lord, to ensure your friendship. Favor God, when God's favor is upon you, he will open. It's like I said, when Jesus sent out the 12 apostles, because his favor was upon them, he moved people to open up their houses to let those guys in. Same thing with Elijah the prophet. When there was the 3-year drought, God told him to go to the widow's house. He had favor. He opened up an opportunity for him to be at the widow's house for that time. One thing I've learned with favor, I don't need to do anything to get someone's favor. I don't need to say, hey, I'll wash your car for you, trying to get you to like me. No. If it's in God's will and God's favor upon me, he's going to create opportunities where people just like me. They're going to see how hard I work. They're going to see I have integrity, and they will just like me, not because I'm sharing with them gifts. And like I said, this is that example we see here of how Joseph and Jacob is still growing and learning to have faith in God and understand it's not by your works, it's by what God's doing. You don't have to give gifts to get people to like you. Just trust God and do the right thing. And if it's in God's will, they will like you.
And then I'll go for 12, 13. You have anything, Sam?
No, I'm just agreeing what he said.
Okay.
You have to intervene. God,
Because
God.
verses 10, you can see the fear some more. Jacob goes, no, if I have found favor with you, please accept this gift from me. Look what he says. He's like really showering Esau at this point. He says, oh, what a relief to see your friendly smile. It's like seeing the face of God. He's like really like he's like, you know what I mean? Wow, you look like God.
Buttering
like,
him up.
Buttering him up, bro.
Like, please take these gifts.
He's buttering him.
I think the next couple of verses is him insisting, Esau is insisting that he leads the way, but Jacob's like, nah, you could go ahead of me. And then he ends up, verse 15 says, all right, but at least let me assign some of my men to guide and protect you. Jacob says, that's not necessary. It's enough that you've received me warmly. And then it says in verse 16, Esau goes ahead. And then verse 17, Jacob, on the other hand, traveled on to Succoth.
Yeah, he ended up going a different way, which is interesting to me. He doesn't end up going where Esau's going.
Yeah. And then I guess later after that, he goes on to, it says in verse 18, later having traveled all the way to Paddan Aram, Jacob arrived safely to the town of Shechem, in the land of Canaan. There he set up camp outside the town, and then he purchases some land and builds an altar. So I guess Esau was living in Seir, but
Exactly.
Jacob ends up going to Shechem.
That's what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have to remember, God told Jacob to go to the land of his father. And remember, Esau was not going to inherit any of that land. So he ended up going to Isaac's brother. Yeah, to Ishmael's side. So that's the thing. This goes to show you that it was never Jacob was not supposed to go with Esau. God told him to go back to the promised land. But it was that on his way back, he was going to have to encounter Esau somehow, because Esau was going to find out he's coming. So if you look at it, he was never going to go with Esau, because that's not what God told him. God said, go back to the land of your father, not to where your brother was. And Esau was not there, because we have the biblical proof that after Jacob left to go to Laban, Esau went to his father's brother. He went somewhere else. So we know that he wasn't in that particular area, and we know in the promise or the blessing, he was not going to get any of it. So that goes to show you again, in fair, he was doing all this just to have peace with Esau, but it was never, God never told him to go with Esau. And you see, he doesn't end up going with Esau or where he's at.
Yep. And that's probably why he didn't want to go along with Esau. He was like, no, you can go ahead.
And that's why he didn't want any of his servants, his men either, if you paid attention.
Oh, exactly.
You see that? He's like, I don't need any of your men. No need.
And I think that's pretty much it. Do you guys have anything additional?
No, I think we covered it.
Oh, sir.
All righty.
That's a wrap.